Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be learning about Emmet in Visual Studio Code. About 2 months ago, I had a subscriber, his name was Lincoln Samuel. He had a question on how I was typing code so fast and how I was getting my CSS, HTML, JavaScript, all that typed up really quickly inside of my programs, and which saved me a lot of time. And I want to show you guys all of that, but more specifically, he wanted to know how I got it to work in JSX or in my React projects, right? So in this video today, I'm going to go through and show you guys how to not only use Emmet, but how to enable it inside of Visual Studio Code. And this isn't like an end-all be-all tutorial. You guys will have to know things like how to create a React project. I'm just going to be showing you guys very quickly on how to do this. Before I get into showing you guys this, I want to talk a little bit about what Emmet is and how it can help you. Now, what is Emmet, right? Basically, most text editors out there allow you to store and reuse code chunks, and this is called snippets. And if you're familiar with Visual Studio or Eclipse, for Java or anything like that, you've probably seen snippets or at least heard of snippets online. And these are really cool, but the problem with snippets is that you have to enter these in yourself. So imagine you find yourself writing code over and over and over again, and that you don't want to write that anymore. You could just write it one time and then use a key command or a snippet command, and it'll type in all that code for you. And that's really great and all, but if you're moving from computer to computer, or maybe you're moving from, IDE to IDE, you don't want to have to memorize where are my snippets at or what are they, right? But generally, there's code blocks and there's stuff that we all type as developers. And these are some more standard things. And in Visual Studio, you can use Emmet to actually autocomplete these. And this works in a wide array of things, but today I'm going to show you guys how to use it in HTML, CSS, and Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead and jump into the code. You guys can see it behind me. I have a Visual Studio on my left-hand side, and I just have the React server running on the right-hand side. You guys can see this is the default Create React App application, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this. So let's create a new HTML document. Now, typically, we wouldn't create an HTML document inside of React, but I'm going to do this for the purpose of the tutorial. So I'm going to call this Emmet.html. And let me increase the font here so it's a little bit easier to see. Emmet.html. All right, so we have that. And over here, super simple. You can use Emmet to autocomplete lots and lots of things, and it's really cool. So let's say we, for instance, wanted to create a span, right? So we can create a span, and I'm going to give it a class name of, let's do card, right? And I click enter. And you can see right away, it did span and it created a class and a card. And now I can click enter again, and now I'm inside there. Now let's say inside there, I wanted to create an unordered list, right? So I've created UL, and you can see it already pops up with Emmet abbreviation. And I haven't actually turned anything on. This for HTML and CSS, this is default in Visual Studio Code. It works with HTML, works with CSS, no settings necessary. But let's go in here and let's look at creating an unordered list. And what we can do is we want to put something inside of this unordered list. We're going to use a right arrow, right? Or a greater than sign. And I'm going to create a list item, right? Now, that list item, I wanted to, let's create 3 list items, right? So I'm going to create a list item, and instead of typing this in manually, I'm going to say times 3, right? So that'll give me 3 of them. And I'm going to say inside of each list item, I want to create a span. And I wanted to have a class of hello, or I want to say hello. But what's really cool is because it's going to use kind of a loop to go through these, we can grab that index out of the loop, and you can grab that out by using a number sign. And all of this stuff I learned off of the Visual Studio website, and I'll show you guys that here in a second. But I'm going to click enter, and you can see right away it created an unordered list inside of our original span, and then inside of that it created 3 list items, which contained each an individual span and given a different class. And you can see we have class hello, but it's not just hello, it's hello 1, 2, and 3. So you guys can see very quickly how Emmet can be very powerful and very quick to get code done. So I didn't have to sit there and type all that out. That would have taken me forever to do. But let's go ahead and move on to some CSS. And CSS is awesome. I don't type a lot of CSS, but let's go ahead and try some of this real quick. And I'm just going to create a category here called foo, and this would be our class, right? And in here, I want to just basically set up the display, right? And you can see right here, Visual Studio Code already has an auto completion, and I can do that. And I typically, display none, right? And that's fine and dandy, and that's not really that hard to type, but imagine if it was quicker. Let's type in margin, and I'm gonna hit M, and I'm gonna type in 10. So M10 and click enter, and boom, margin 10 pixels. It automatically knows exactly what I want. Same thing, for example, for padding. I can type in P10, and it automatically knows exactly what I want. I can click enter, and it pulls all that information in very quickly, types all that out. Because if I had to type that in by manually, you can see where that takes me a lot more time. And also, it is prone to spelling mistakes because typically when doing these tutorials, I try to type fast to be, productive and save you guys some time. I end up doing a lot of spelling mistakes and having to go back and actually fixing them, right? So that's perfect and all fine and dandy. But what's more important, or more what Lincoln Samuel was asking, was how does this work with JSX, right? So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this, let's call this username.jsx. So I created that, and typically what I would do is I would have to, I'd have to import React, and I need to pull in the React component and do all that, but there's a super easy way to do this. But it doesn't work until we enable it in settings. So if you try using Emmet inside of a Java or a JavaScript React file, it's actually not going to work well. So how we fix this is we go up to code, and then we go to preferences, settings, and then from settings, you can browse all these settings. I typically just go to user settings, and you can see right here what I did was I said Emmet.include languages, and inside of there is a category. And I said I want to include JavaScript because JSX is just another version of JavaScript. It's just an accelerated or a greater, deeper meaning of JavaScript, right? Because you're still using JavaScript. And what I'm going to do here is I want to use JavaScript React. And I'm just going to type in that. You don't need to worry about any of these other settings. These are all my personal settings that I use for all of my projects. Once you've enabled that inside of your settings, you can save out of that, close out of that, go into here, and there's a really cool way you can do this. So instead of trying to create a React, component, we can type in RCC, right? And it automatically detects that. And when I click tab, it automatically imports React, imports our component, and it creates a default class. Now, what's really cool is it actually took that class name based upon our file name. So you can see up here that I created a username.jsx, and right here, it just pulled that in from the file name. Now, I did break kind of semantics. I should have given this an uppercase. So what I could do is I could rename this to username.jsx, right? And I could just erase all this, RCC, enter or tab, and it corrects that for me. Or I could just rename it manually. But right there, that saved a lot of time for me, and it removes a lot of the boilerplate code that I typically have to type in. But JSX is really powerful because in React, what you're doing is you're using JavaScript to inject HTML into your virtual DOM. So what we're going to do here is it works just the same. You can write your HTML code just the same here. So let's say we want to put a header. I'm going to put H1, and I want to give this a class of card, another class of text block, right? And I can click enter, and right there you can see it created it H1, which is a header 1, and it created a card and a text block. But let's notice something very important here. And this is awesome to understand. When it comes to React, let's go back real quick. Let me back up. When it comes to HTML, and you're going to use a class on one of your elements, you just use the class tag. But that doesn't work with JSX. What you have to do is you actually have to use the class name tag. But look how smart that is. Look how smart and intelligent Emmet is. It knew the difference between an HTML document and to use a class and a React document or a JSX file format. And it actually used class name. And you can see very quickly I can type code out and I can pump out a lot of stuff. So inside of this H1, let's say I wanted to put a link, or an A tag. So I can type an A, and then inside there I can put an, let's just put another H1 just for this, or H2 just for the sake of it. And you can see right there, it created a link and it put a header 2 inside there. Normally you're not going to put headers inside headers, but just for demo purposes, I wanted to show you guys that. So that's how very quickly you can set up Emmet inside Visual Studio Code. And I did promise to show you where I can find that documentation. So you can type in Emmet Visual Studio Code. And very easily, you can just click on this link at the top. And on Visual Studio's website, you can see they show you all of the settings, examples on how to set this up. And it'll show you things like the actual file formats it accepts, the type of languages that it accepts, and it's really awesome and really cool. Now, if you guys liked this video and you guys thought it was useful to you, especially Lincoln Samuel, I'm going to keep calling you out. If you guys found this useful to you, please drop a like and a comment down below. Again, if you guys have any questions, message me on Twitter at Chris State, and I'll see you guys on the next video.